Hey, my name is Jimmy, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a stinger transition using Adobe After Effects and OBS to increase the production value of your stream. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Jimmy, and welcome to the Elphazor gaming channel, where you'll find tutorials, tips and tricks on how to level up the design of your stream visuals. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a motion designer for the past 14 years. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button to see more videos like this in the future. So the topic of today's video is the scene transition, or more commonly known as the stinger transition. What is a scene or stinger transition? A stinger transition is a short animated video element that plays between the changing of two scenes. This commonly happens when someone, for example, switches from their intermission scene to their live scene. The best example is when you see a stinger transition in sports to signify that you are watching an instant replay. Now, why is it important to have a stinger transition? On the surface, a transition can seem unnecessary, but the fact is, they can add to your stream production value as well as reinforce your branding. Let's be honest, simply, it makes your stream look more interesting and just way cooler. Now that we've defined what a stinger transition is, let's go over what we'll be covering in this video. First, we're going to go into Adobe After Effects and create our own custom stinger using our own branding colors and logos. So you may be asking, why use After Effects? The transition that we're looking to create is a bit more complex than the norm. That requires us to use a more powerful piece of software. After Effects is the industry leader when it comes to creating motion graphics. After Effects is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, which includes programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, and Premiere. If you don't have a subscription to the Adobe Creative Cloud, don't worry. You can download a 7-day trial of the full version. I've placed a link in the description below so that you can download it and check it out. After we're done animating, we're going to jump into OBS to set up our scene transition so you can use it in your stream. If you haven't heard of OBS, or Open Broadcast Software, it's an open source software that allows you to record video and live stream. If you don't have OBS, I'll leave a link in the description below so you can download it. If you're using Streamlabs OBS, I'll cover that at the end of the video. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's fire up After Effects and jump right in.
Okay, so now we're in After Effects. I went ahead and imported a few things into the project that we will need. I've imported the Elphazor gaming color palette so we can reference it whenever we need to. I've also imported the Elphazor logo as well as a sound effect that will add to kind of enhance the stinger. The first thing that we'll need to do is create a new comp. If you don't know what a comp is basically the canvas or a container that stores things like layers of video, audio, text, and visual graphics. You can create a new comp by clicking this button right here, or by clicking the new comp icon, which is located at the bottom of the project window with this icon right here. So let's go ahead and kind of press this button and start a new comp. Now you'll need to set your composition or comp settings basically according to how you have things kind of set up for your stream. So the first thing we'll do is we'll give this this comp a name. Why don't we just call it Stinger? And then in terms of the width and the height, like I said before, you're gonna want the settings to match your stream. So in most cases it'll be 1920 for the width and 1080 for the height. Pixel aspect ratio, typically it's going to be square pixels, and then for the frame rate, again, you're going to want that to match your stream. So we're streaming at 60 frames per second. And then the last thing that you're going to want to adjust or set will be the duration. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 2 seconds, since Stinger transitions generally only take 2 seconds. So once you kind of have that complete, you can go ahead and click OK. Now let's take a look at our composition viewer. You'll notice that the viewer has this checkerboard kind of background going on. This simply signifies that there's transparency currently in the composition. In order to create a Stinger sequence, the sequence needs to begin and end on some sort of transparency. Now, somewhere in between that beginning and end sequence, you need to have the entire comp covered with something graphically so that you can switch from the current scene to the end scene. So if you don't see the transparency checkerboard when you first create your comp and you're getting, let's say, a black background, you can just go ahead and click this little checkerboard icon, and it says toggle transparency grid, and you'll want to click that in order to see that transparency grid and make it visible, and kind of show you here how it works. But like I said, you might have it unchecked or unclicked, so go ahead and click it, and that way you can see the transparency. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this color palette that we kind of brought in and drag it into the comp viewer, just so that we have it when we need to reference it. It's a little bit small right now, so why don't we kind of scale it up so that we can kind of see the colors or see the boxes swatches a little better. Next, we're going to need to create a solid, and to do that, we're going to right click in the timeline and then select new, and then scroll down to solid. Okay, with the solid settings open, we're going to name our solid. I'm going to go ahead and name this just green arrow, and then set the width to 1920 and the height to 1080. We'll leave the units to pixels, as well as leave the pixel aspect ratio to square, or square pixels. If for any reason these settings don't match the comp size, you can always use the button right here, automatically make your solid settings match the dimensions of your comp. We'll go ahead and click that. It's already been set, but whenever you see these dimensions and they're not quite the same size, you can go ahead and click that button there. Okay, and then lastly, to change the color of the solid, we're gonna want this this solid color to be the Elphazor green here. If you click within the swatch that's down here, you can change the solid to whatever color you want. Red, purple, blue, just by kind of scrolling or selecting inside of this box right here. We'll hit OK, but I'm gonna, since we have access to the color palette or the color swatch, I'm gonna go ahead and click the eyedropper tool and hover above the green color here and click, and that way we have it sampled just from the swatch here. So now that we've got everything kind of set up for the solid, we're gonna go ahead and click OK. Now that we have a solid, let's animate the stinger. If you recall from the intro of this video, the stinger animates from off screen left, and then holds in the middle for a minute, and then animates off screen going to the right. The first thing we're gonna need to do is select our green arrow solid, which we already have, and then we're gonna hit P on our keyboard. So this will reveal the position property of our layer. So let's make sure also that the current time indicator, which is this blue kind of teardrop thing, is at the front of the timeline, which it is. So again, making sure you have your green arrow selected. We're gonna move the solid off screen by clicking and holding the solid, and then holding the shift key on your keyboard, which will restrain or constrain, I should say, the y-axis movement. So we're gonna just kind of push this layer off screen, push it all the way off screen. I'm gonna go ahead and hide the color palette since we don't necessarily need to reference it right now, but we'll kind of keep it there if we need it. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna click on the stopwatch icon that is located next to the position property. So by clicking this, we've added a keyframe for the current position of the solid to start off screen. So now we're going to animate the solid back to the center of the screen so that we have that full coverage of the comp. So we'll move the current time indicator forward to about 30 frames, and then we're going to select the green arrow again, or make sure it's selected, and then we're actually going to click and hold in the comp viewer. While holding the shift key, we're going to move the layer back kind of to the center of the comp. So if you look at the timeline, you'll see that After Effects has automatically created a keyframe for us. Next, we'll need to add an additional keyframe for the pause in the middle so that we can reveal and animate our logo. To do that, let's select the previous keyframe and then move the current time indicator down 30 frames or to the 1 second mark. Then we're actually, with this still selected, we're gonna hit Command C and Command V to copy and paste that keyframe. So essentially we're having the solid not move between 30 frames and the 1 minute mark. So it's staying put or staying still. Okay, so we've got the beginning animation, we've got the brief hold in the middle. Now we're going to create the end animation. So let's move the current time indicator down 30 more frames so that it's at the kind of 1.5 second mark. We're going to make sure the green arrow again is selected, and then position the layer off screen to the right. And again, we're going to click and drag, and then while we're holding the shift key, we're going to position it or move it off screen and to the right. Okay, so now that we've kind of set up the animation, let's stop for a brief second and preview the animation so far. So let's move the time indicator to the front and then press spacebar to preview. As you can see, we've got our stinger, but the animation is pretty mechanical and boring looking. To make things less mechanical, we're going to apply some easing to the keyframes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to select all 4 keyframes, and then right click while we're hovering on one of the keyframes, and then we're going to scroll down to Keyframe Assistant and select Easy Ease. Now if you look at our timeline, let me go ahead and stop the preview. Now if you look at our timeline, you'll notice that the keyframes have changed from the diamond shape that they normally have to a kind of hourglass shape. This is just to indicate that easing has been applied to those keyframes. So let's preview the animation again by hitting spacebar. You might not notice it too much, but there is some easing as we hit each of those keyframes. Now to really bring some personality and variation to the easing, we're going to need to tweak some of the speed curves for those keyframes. To do that, we're going to select those keyframes. So let me go ahead and stop the preview. We're going to need to select the keyframes, and then we're gonna have to hit the graph editor icon that's in the timeline, and that's it, this icon here. So we'll change the speed of each keyframe one by one. So let's select the first keyframe that's down here. We can just click on it and then kind of pull and drag the Bezier handle to kind of introduce or kind of exaggerate that that easing. We'll do the same thing for the rest of these keyframes too. We'll kind of pull these Bezier handles a little bit to kind of, like I said, vary the speed. So we'll do that with the third keyframe, and then same as the fourth when it kind of animates off. Sorry, let me hit Command Z. I kind of messed this one up. So with this one selected, you want to make sure you hit Shift to kind of constrain it so it doesn't go up or down. Select this last one and then have it so that the kind of graphs matches on both the animation in and the animation out. Okay, so again, let's preview the results. I'm going to hit spacebar. As you can see, everything is a little more exaggerated, and there's also a little more speed when it's moving from left to right, and then from the middle to off screen. It looks less mechanical, and it has kind of this organic type movement, as opposed to just leaving it with the kind of default easing. Okay, so we've got our animation. Next, we're going to create that arrow or triangle shape of the stinger. There are probably a few different ways that you can do this sort of thing, but the way I like to do this is with using masks. So let me stop the preview here, and let's have the layer kind of sit in the middle so that we can see how we change the shape basically of the solid. And like I said, we're gonna use masks, and to create a mask, you want to select the layer, and then navigate up to the toolbar and double click the rectangle tool. Now by double clicking it, this will create a rectangular mask that is the size of whatever solid you have selected. Next, we'll need to add a couple of additional points in our mask in order to create the kind of arrow shape. I'm going to navigate to the toolbar again and click and hold on the pen tool to reveal the additional tools and select the Add Vertex tool, which is this pen tool with the plus sign. So I'm going to add an additional vertex on both the left and right side of the rectangle. So I'm going to click somewhere in the middle in between these two vertices here, and then I'm just going to eyeball it and do the same on the left side of the rectangle. So now we've got the necessary points in our mask to kind of create that kind of pointy triangle look. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and then shift click and select these two vertices, and I'm going to move them to the left so that we get that kind of triangle shape. For the back side, I'm going to select the vertice that's in the middle and then just kind of eyeball it and make it basically the same kind of point that we have on the right side there. Now we've got the shape going. Let's go ahead and preview our animation again. So by now you've probably noticed that the middle of the stinger no longer has full coverage of the screen area. To fix that, we're gonna need to adjust the size of the layer a bit. So let me stop the preview again. Let's scale the width of the layer so that we can completely cover the screen area in the middle. So that looks better, but with that adjustment, we've kind of changed the shape of the aerial. So let's fix that real quick. What we're going to want to do is grab these vertices again and kind of change the shape so it matches what we had before. So I'm going to move this vertex in, and then we've got kind of some excess. We just want to make sure that it's just big enough to cover up the screen there. So we're going to go ahead and select these three vertices and kind of move them in, or move them over to the right so that it just covers the screen enough. Okay, so now that we've fixed that, let's check the rest of the animation. I'm going to go ahead and press spacebar again to preview. So it looks like we need to fix the beginning and end of the stinger. So if I kind of stop the preview, the arrow is in frame, and we, at the beginning, we don't want the arrow to be in frame. And then the other issue with it is if we go to the end, the back of the arrow, the left side of the arrow, is actually still in frame there. So it's something that we're going to have to fix. So let's move the current time indicator all the way to the front of the timeline. And then let's move the layer so it's completely off screen. So we're going to select, and then while we're holding shift down, we're going to kind of push it off to the left there. And then let's go to the last keyframe in the timeline. And again, we're going to select the green arrow layer, and then while holding shift, we're going to kind of slide that layer all the way off to the right. Again, let's preview the animation. So it looks like everything is moving properly. We have our transparency in the beginning, and then again the transparency at the end. Okay, so let's move on to adding some branding to the stinger. I'm gonna drag, let me stop the preview. I'm gonna drag the Elphazor logo into the middle of the comp there and scale it up. It's real small right now, so we want to make sure to kind of scale things up. So I'm gonna hit the S button on the keyboard to reveal the scale properties, and then I'm gonna adjust the logo so that it's at kind of an acceptable size. If you notice, the logo is a little pixelated. To fix this, we're gonna click the continuously rasterization button on the logo layer. If you don't see this switch in your timeline, you're gonna want to simply right click in the label area, and then make sure you select columns, and then make sure switches is checked on. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, and then if you look at it real close, if I kind of zoom in here, it's no longer blurry here. I'll kind of turn it off and on, so it's very blurry when you don't have it on, and then when you click it, everything kind of becomes crisp and clear. So a couple things to keep in mind though is this only works for vector files such as Illustrator and EPS files. This sort of thing doesn't work with raster files like PNGs and JPEGs. So just one kind of gotcha, or one thing to kind of keep in mind. Okay, so what we're gonna want to do is we want this logo to scale up over time. So I'm gonna zoom back out. So to do this, to make it scale over time, let's go to the front of the timeline again, and then since we already have the scale property revealed, we're gonna go ahead and hit the stopwatch icon to set a keyframe there. And then next we're gonna go to the end of the timeline, and then we're going to scale the logo a bit more, probably say, you know, like 30 to maybe 40% bigger than what you started off with. Okay, let's hit the spacebar to preview what we have so far. As you can see, the logo is scaling over time as we intended, but the logo is visible at the wrong time. We want the logo to reveal as the green arrow layer animates into place. To fix that, we're going to duplicate the green arrow layer by selecting it and duplicating it by pressing Command D on the keyboard. Now let's move the duplicate layer above the logo layer and then set the logo's track matte to alpha matte. This will use the green arrow's alpha to reveal the logo. Okay, let's hit spacebar again to preview. Now there it is. We've got a fully animated stinger transition along with our branding on top of it. Before we finish, let's not forget to add that sound effect that I originally imported. So let me stop the preview again. So I'm going to drag the sound effect into the timeline, and I'm actually going to drop it to the bottom of the timeline. I'm going to expand the layer a bit so that we can kind of see the audio properties. I'm also going to expand the waveform so we can kind of see the audio levels visually. This is going to help us kind of adjust things. We'll want to place the peak at the moment the stinger is animating in and out. Let's move things to that point so that they line up, and probably right about here is what we're looking for. Okay, if we preview it, you can see how this enhances the animation. The sound effect is a little bit loud right now, so let me stop the preview and let's kind of lower the volume of it a bit, and let's set it to somewhere around negative 15 or so. Let's hit spacebar and preview it again. Okay, so that works. Now let's do one other thing and copy and paste the sound effect and add it to the end of the animation. So I'm going to stop the preview here and then make sure I have the sound effect selected. I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate, and then I'm gonna expand it until I see the waveform, and then I'm gonna move this so that it kind of lines up with the point that the stinger kind of animates off. So the peak is right about here, and that's where we have the highest point in audio in our waveform. So again, let's preview it and check it hopefully one last time. Okay. All right, there you go. You know, we've got our transition and it's working properly. We've got the sound effects, we've got the branding in it. So the last thing you're going to want to do is of course save the file. So again, let me stop the preview. You're gonna, in order to save it, you want to navigate to the file menu and then scroll down to save or save as. I kind of have it already set up, so if I hit save, it should save to the designated area that I have on my hard drive. Okay, so now that the stinger animation is complete with sound, let's render the movie file. To do this, we'll need to make sure you have the WebM codec installed on your computer. WebM files are a good mix of high quality while keeping file sizes very low. This is important, especially when you're running multiple things on your computer while streaming. This will cause less stress on your CPU, which will help with your in-game experience. If you don't have the WebM codec, I will leave a link in the description below. Be sure to install the codec by following the instructions on the website. Okay, to start the render, you want to select your Stinger comp in the timeline or in the project window. And then you're going to want to navigate up to the composition menu and then scroll down to add to Adobe Media Encoder. Once Media Encoder is done launching and your composition has been loaded, click on the drop down in the format section and choose WebM. Next, you'll want to click the blue link to adjust the settings of the render. Make sure to click the match source button so that the dimensions are the same as your comp is. Now, if we scroll down a bit to the codec settings, make sure you have VP9 selected since it's the latest version. The method should be set to constant quality. You can adjust the quality slider as you like, but you want to keep in mind that you'll want the file size to be on the smaller end. Anywhere between kind of 4 and 6 megabytes should be fine. If you look down here, there's an estimated file size, so this is helpful with what how to gauge what you'll want to kind of set your quality at. I usually leave it between 60 and 70. You can keep the next 3 settings as the default. The one setting that you want to make sure is checked is include alpha channel. This will keep your transparency intact when it comes time to add it to OBS. Lastly, we're going to hit OK. So the last thing that we're going to do is select the location for the final rendered file to be saved. So we're going to click kind of the blue text here, which will open your save dialog box, and then I have a folder set up that says renders. I already have it kind of rendered out here, so why don't we go ahead and name it something different and render it out anyways. We're going to call it maybe Stinger Elphazor, and then hit save. Okay, so once you have all those things kind of set up, I'm going to hit the green arrow button in the top right corner to begin the render.
All right, now that we've got the Stinger transition rendered out, let's jump into OBS and set it up.
So here we are in OBS. What you need to do is navigate to the Scene Transitions section and then hit the plus sign to add a transition. In the drop down, you want to select Stinger, and then it'll ask you to enter the name of the transition. We're going to just keep it as Stinger, so I'm going to hit OK. Once you get into the properties window, select the Stinger file by hitting Browse and then choosing the WebM file wherever you have it stored, or wherever you have your Stinger stored. So I've got it in this folder here, and now I've selected it, and I'm going to hit Open. So we've got our file path here. Next, we'll set the transition point to 1,000 milliseconds, because that is the point where we have full coverage of the screen. We know it's at 1 second, and 1 second equals 1,000 milliseconds. Let's turn the audio monitoring to monitor and output. Since we have sound, we want to be able to hear that when the transition is happening. We can leave the audio fade style as is. Why don't we go ahead and press the press the preview transition button to kind of see how it works. So, okay, let's check it again. But it looks like it's working properly, which is great. Now that we've kind of set this up in OBS, let's move on to Streamlabs OBS, since the setup is slightly different from just standard or regular OBS. Here we are in Streamlabs OBS. The only difference in the setup really is that the scene transition button is in a different location than in standard OBS or OBS Studio. To edit the scene transition, we're going to click on the gear icon located in the scenes window. So we're going to click here, and then we're going to hit add transition. We're going to name the transition, of course, Stinger for consistency's sake, and then change the type to Stinger, which will give us some more options. The duration, as we know, it's at 2 seconds, so we're going to put 2000 milliseconds. We're going to hit browse to bring in our WebM file. We're going to leave transition point type to milliseconds, and then transition point, we're going to type 1000 in there since we know that already. And then for audio monitoring, we're going to change it to monitor and output so we can hear it in our headset as it's happening. And then we'll leave audio fade style to its default. Then we're going to hit done, and then right here you will need to set your default. Since we just added that new stinger, let's set that to the default stinger, that way we can use it right away. And then now that we've got everything kind of set up, we're going to hit done, and that's how we have it set up in Streamlabs OBS. Not much different from standard OBS, just a couple slight differences, and that's about it. So,
all right, so to quickly recap, I showed you how to use After Effects to create an eye-catching stinger transition that reinforces your brand. I also showed you how to set up the stinger transition in OBS and Streamlabs OBS. Now that you've completed the tutorial, you can build your own custom stinger and start using it in your next stream. I would love to see what you guys come up with. Post your custom stinger in the comments below or tag me at Elphazor on Instagram or Twitter. If you found value in this video, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody. Hey, make sure to subscribe to see more great content like this. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.